I want to file an official complaint with the New York Bar Association about what Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds and their shady legal team pulled.
All right, so hard copy of my complaint here.
Get to the mail room here. Is it mail for collection slot? Go. You'll remember last week we found out that Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds and their shady legal team filed a fake lawsuit months ago. Before all of this started, they filed a fake lawsuit using a fake shell company called Vanzan in order to officially get their hands on private text messages from Justin Baldoni's publicist that, of course, they had already gotten access to under the table, unethically, I'd say illegally, by Steph Jones. And of course, Steph Jones is one of the big villains in this whole saga. But she had already given these confidential texts, the contents of these confidential texts, to Blake and Ryan's team. But of course, they weren't able to use them unless they could get their hands on these texts through an official subpoena. And so that's what this fake lawsuit was for. It was a fake lawsuit, sham lawsuit, fake company, shell company. The whole thing was a charade. And I have seen a number of lawyers online talking about how this was shady, this was unethical, and it was perhaps illegal. I watched Candace Owens' show the other day, and she was talking about how she had spoken to a number of experts who said that they couldn't believe that this fancy legal team had engaged in these types of shenanigans. So I don't know. I know that there's a lot of debate about this, but here's what I think. At the very least, I want someone official to look into this shit. And so I was trying to think about what could be done about this. And it occurred to me that if you want to hold someone to account for something, one of the best ways of doing that is to trap them in the gears, in the bureaucratic gears of an administrative investigation. And I don't hold out any hope that this is going to trigger some major investigation, but at the very least, what it'll do is it will force someone in an official capacity to at least look into this. The attorneys responsible for this BS will be contacted. They'll be questioned about this. They will have to explain themselves, and someone is going to look into this. And who knows, someone might actually get in trouble for this. So I am going to show you the process by which I am filing this complaint. And so I'm Googling New York Bar Association complaint. And then I see an entry here for how to file a complaint against a lawyer or judge in New York. Click on that. And it says here, if you believe a lawyer may have violated the rules of professional conduct, yes, indeed, I do, you can write a letter to the appropriate attorney grievance committee or fill out and submit a form available from their websites. The form, and it also says that if you plan to fill in and email this form, you also need to post a copy or send 2 copies in the post if you don't plan to email. So I'm going to be filling this out online, and then I'm also going to print it out, and I'm going to put that hard copy in the mail. So in order to figure out which attorney we're complaining about here, we need to go back to the fake lawsuit that Blake's shell company filed. And so I'm going to go to Leanne Newton's page. If you're not familiar with Leanne Newton, she is online every day serving up the best legal coverage of this controversy. Every day, new updates on the legal aspects of the situation. And so she's posted this here, this fake lawsuit. You can see that it was respectfully submitted by Manat, Phelps, and Phillips, LLP. Now, this is an extremely prestigious, well-known law firm, and I cannot imagine that they are loving all of the negative attention that they're getting right now from these shady and, I think, illegal transactions that they engaged in with this fake lawsuit here. So Manat, Phelps, and Phillips, and then we have the actual attorney, Samantha J. Katsy. Not a good look, lady. Not a good look. So these are the attorneys that I'm going to be complaining about in my official complaint. So I'm going to complain about Samantha Katsy, and then also, of course, the larger law firm, Manat, Phelps, and Phillips, LLP. By the way, this is Samantha Katsy. Again, I guess you never thought, Samantha, that these kinds of shady shenanigans were going to get called out, would ever come to light. And this seems to be, y'all, the major overarching mistake, strategic mistake that Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds and their team has engaged in time and time again is their assumption that their shady, unethical dealings would not come to light. They really thought that they could engage in all of this unethical and I would say illegal behavior in this case. They really thought that they could do all of this and none of it would ever come to light. Well, it's coming to light now. And Samantha Katzee, I hope that someone holds you to account for what you did here. And I hope that Mannett, Phillips, and Phelps gets a ton of negative PR from this.
All right, so this is the letter, the complaint that I wrote. Ended up being more extensive than I intended, but I wanted to make sure that I got all the salient points in there. I wrote this up, typed this up in my Gmail account, but I'm going to transfer it over to a Word document, print it out, and also attach it. So it'll be nice and official, but this is what I wrote. Thank you for considering the following complaint. Please contact me if additional explanation is wanted. I am concerned that Samantha Katzee and Mannett Phillips law firm representing Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds apparently filed an essentially fake lawsuit in order to circumvent transparent judicial procedures and safeguards and obtain serious confidential materials through a flawed discovery process. The process was flawed because the lawsuit and subsequent subpoena request misrepresented the nature of the filing's intentions and neglected to mention that the confidential and legally protected information, text, DMs, files, had already been accessed and illegally transmitted to the plaintiff prior to the lawsuit filing. Here are the particulars again, and of course the plaintiff, actually, Vanzan, was a different entity than Blake Lively, right? But the point is that it was going to the same person. These things had already been transmitted to the same person. Here are the particulars, again, available online, and I would be happy to direct you to sources if requested. Got a little punctuation issue there, but I will fix it. It says text DMs. Okay, so point A, text DMs and other serious and confidential electronic files from a business phone owned by publicist Jennifer Abel were confiscated by Stephanie Jones of JonesWorks PR when Abel left JonesWorks to start her own firm. Stephanie Jones then had the phone forensically examined. While this may have been Stephanie Jones's right as Abel's ex-employer, the phone, and honestly, I don't know the legality of that, so maybe it's not legal. I don't know, but just conceding that, moving on, because that's not the issue. The phone contained confidential information, not only from Abel, but Abel and Jones's clients, such as Justin Baldoni and Wayfarer. Jones did not have the right to transmit these confidential electronic files to just anyone and everyone without permission or notification, but that is what she allegedly did. Stephanie Jones allegedly shared contents from the phone with Blake Lively and or her team members. Some of these contents were important to Blake Lively's dispute with Justin Baldoni and Wayfarer and were later used in Lively's CRD complaint, a New York Times article that canceled Baldoni, and eventually in Lively's lawsuit against Baldoni and Wayfarer. Point C, Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds wanted to use these unethically and illegally obtained phone contents in Lively's CRD and legal complaints and in the Times article, but her lawyers had to find a way to appear to obtain the contents legally and properly. However, instead of filing a public lawsuit against Baldoni and Wayfarer to just subpoena the contents, they filed an essentially fake, vague John Doe lawsuit in which no actual names or entities were stated. Remember, they were just suing John Does or Does. And the lawsuit was not filed by Blake Lively, but by an inactive shell company of hers and Ryan's named Vanzan that she seemingly had used only one other time to buy several pieces of furniture. This was not a real company, and it had zero contracts or contractual obligations with any individuals or entities. Therefore, it shouldn't have been suing anyone. You have no contracts, no contractual obligations. There's no need to sue. Then I write, this Vanzan lawsuit was never a serious lawsuit. Rather, it seems it was merely a retroactive mechanism to officially yet surreptitiously obtain the necessary phone contents after first receiving them under the table illegally. This lawsuit was never meant to be a serious, legit lawsuit in its own right, which is why it was only open long enough to subpoena the phone contents. No other discovery apparently took place. No one else was subpoenaed. And the lawsuit was closed right before Blake Lively filed her CRD complaint and had the New York Times article written, both of which were based on the contents of Jennifer Abel's phone, the phone in question. Something is more than a little fishy here. And if you go online, you'll see many people agree. Thank you for considering my claim. And then my name.
All right, so I've got the hard copy of my complaint here. Gonna take it to the mailbox.
Okay, here we are. Of course, I'm visiting my mom, so taking it to the mail room here. All right, we got the deposit mail for collection slot, and here we go.
This is, as I said, one of the few ways that little people like us, normal everyday Joes and Janes, can hold powerful individuals like Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds and their fancy manat lawyers to account. To, if nothing else, put some extra eyeballs on this situation and again force some of these people, like in this case, these attorneys, these shady attorneys, to at least have to explain themselves, right? And as always, I want to thank you all for supporting my work. For those of you who have been watching a lot of my coverage and now you see that I'm out here, look, I mean, I went to Austin and I protested filing this Bar Association complaint. I'm covering this case like a motherfucker, not a member of any big podcast group. I'm just out here on my own doing this. And so if you appreciate my work, if you appreciate what I'm out here doing along with others, is it really too much to ask for some donations? And not only for me, but also for some of the others who've been doing such great work. Anyway, just food for thought. All right. My links are below. Stay tuned. Much more coverage to come. Bye, everybody.